What to make of Andrew Tate? Recently, Andrew Tate rose to prominence on social media, and as you might have known, he is at the center of many major controversies. He is known by some as a misogynist, a sexist, and a rapist due to allegations of forcing women to perform sexual acts on and off camera. By others, he is seen as a hero of our age, a man fighting and rooting for masculinity in a more traditional sense, as well as a father figure to the many boys who feel lost in an era of rapidly changing modernity. First, I'd like to start off by saying I'm not going to praise nor condemn Andrew Tate, for I am not interested in following a certain narrative. What I am going for is giving you an as nuanced, balanced, and unbiased perspective on this phenomenon of our age based on rationality rather than emotionality. Emery Andrew Tate III was born on December 1st, 1986, to a British mother and Afro American father. He's mostly known for his professional kickboxing and as a businessman. Andrew Tate started kickboxing in 2005 and worked in the TV advertising business to support himself. He became seventh best in Britain in November 2008 and got his first championship in 2009 and ranked number one in that year. Andrew Tate rose to publicity in 2016 with his appearance in the TV program Big Brother. He got under scrutiny for homophobic and racist comments on Twitter a few years prior. He was removed from the show after an incident which included Tate allegedly beating a woman with a belt. And I say allegedly here because the beating was claimed to be consensual by both Tate and the woman. Vice later reported, however, that removal was caused by an ongoing police investigation closed in 2019 with no charges filed. Tate offers online courses on accumulating wealth and male to female interactions, and he also operated a webcam studio. According to Tate, the webcam studio was selling fake sob stories and was a total scam. Tate also operated Hustlers University, in which he gives people advice on making money outside of traditional employment using pre recorded videos and a Discord server. He also has an affiliate marketing program in which members are given a commission for bringing others on board. Some say this is a pyramid scheme. Andrew Tate became the most searched for person in 2022, surpassing both Donald Trump and COVID 19. During the Me Too era of 2017, he tweeted about rape victims having a partial responsibility for their rape and claimed that depression isn't real, for which he was heavily criticized. Now, I am not interested on what he did on social media or that he got arrested because of the whole thing with Greta Thunberg. You can look those things up, and I'm not going to beat dead horses. What I am interested about is what he represents and what his influence is on his audience. It is very hard to find articles about him or videos made about Tate that are balanced and nuanced. If anything, Andrew Tate is one of the least nuanced people I've seen. Most content I have found are either speaking about him negatively, claiming he is in fact a misogynist and sexist, or it goes the other way around and people are praising him as a hero of sorts. Making this video, I realized that I should shape a balanced, rational view based on those opposite viewpoints and find out by myself what to make of Andrew Tate. The truth often lies somewhere in the middle, but I do think it is possible in some cases that the truth leans more towards either side of a spectrum. What I have found is that, on one hand, he really seems to help a lot of young men struggling to find their way in an ever changing and honestly confusing era, based on anecdotes by people saying Tate talked them out of ending themselves. A lot has changed since last decade. In the UK, young boys watching him are aged 16 to 17, and at least 80% of them consume Tate's content. During their lifetime, social life rapidly changed. Too rapidly, if you'd ask me, to be honest. 16 years ago, in 2006, Facebook just got launched on college campuses. and the role of social media was, aside from maybe MySpace, non existent. Fast forward 5 years in 2011, Facebook was all the craze. People are setting up Twitter accounts. Instagram becomes a thing. Nowadays, social media dominates social life and professional life for a very huge part. And it is honestly very confusing. If I were to look at Twitter, for example, it has become some kind of digital agora where the cultural elite decide what can be said and what can be said, who gets cancelled, etc. Instagram dictates what looks good, and Facebook is just a retirement home at this point. We had the Me Too hashtag, mostly on social media, which completely changed the way we view connections between men and women. We now have a culture war with opposing sides, roughly speaking, liberal leftists on one side and conservatives at the other, barely engaging into healthy discussion. The reason Andrew Tate is so popular is because he offers an answer to young men who feel disenfranchised. As Tate himself says, men want an action figure. And I think this is especially the case when you're a young man, especially when you feel like a life based on more traditional values is the way to live. Tate is also seen as an opposing force to what society is pushing. And when you're a somewhat edgy, rebellious teenage boy, this is pure gold. It is easy to imagine why men feel suppressed. But I'm very aware of what such a strong narrative can produce on an emotional level, because I am a man that does feel somewhat of a disconnection to society once in a while. I think science is the answer in this. A very prominent and important thing to study is the change of definition of masculinity, because I think this is what is at the core of the feelings of disenfranchisement in many young men. Many young men feel like they are not allowed to be masculine by traditional standards. The question then becomes, is there a so-called crisis of masculinity? I have found several sociological papers, which I will put in the description, describing why men perceive that they are not allowed to be men. It should be noted, however, that these papers see masculinity as something that is shaped socially and not as something that occurs naturally. In 1999, a list was proposed of contradicting factors leading to a crisis in masculinity. Whether this crisis is embedded in reality or perceived is not clear to me. The list is as follows: men more than women are much more reluctant to face up to and respond to physical and psychological problems. They suffer from depression at the loss of the breadwinner role and the status that went with it. There is constant job stress on the daily, and men feel trapped between old style masculinity and nurturing new manism. In a way, traditional masculinity has become unfashionable. Traditional masculine traits like being logical, disciplined, rational, and competitive are perceived as stigma of deviance, whereas traits like spontaneity, intuition, expressiveness, compassion, and empathetic care, traits that used to make women to be perceived inferior to men, are increasingly seen as markers of maturity and health. It is also important to give you some context, and the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to look at history in general, but in this case, the history of the men's liberation movement, men's movement, and just the manosphere in general. The 20th century saw a rise of men movements, often alongside and in response to the women's movement and feminism. During the rise of feminism during the 1960s and 70s, the men's liberation movement rose and proposed that the patriarchal structures that harmed women also harmed men by confining them to the male sex role. However, during the 1970s and 80s, a split occurred in the men's liberation movement. On one hand, you had the pro feminists, and on the other, the anti feminists, roughly speaking. This last thing is interesting to me because it kind of ties into the last line of the list I just named, that men feel trapped between old style masculinity and nurturing new manism. The talking point of masculinity being in crisis is important to study in this regard. There have been several occurrences within popular media, both online and offline, that gave shape to what we are witnessing today. The Me Too hashtag is one of those. It rose in 2017 when actress Alyssa Milano tweeted about her sexual harassment at the hands of producer and waste of space Harvey Weinstein. Another occurrence I have found was the infamous Gillette commercial, in which Gillette basically proposed men should be calling each other out for something some would call toxic male behavior. So called toxic male behavior is seen by others as traditional male behavior and therefore cannot be deemed problematic. Ergo, the notion that traditional male behavior, which is often seen as a natural way of being for men by the anti-feminists, is toxic, is seen as a direct attack on man and masculinity, as it seems to be an attempt at feminizing men. In a sense, men feel attacked by feminism. Therefore, proponents of the idea that masculinity is innate and part of the natural order of things do not agree with the notion that gender is socially constructed, roughly speaking. This, of course, partially leading to the culture war we see today. Going back to the Me Too hashtag, what can be observed is a ripple effect through discussions on the societal level, in the sense that it raised questions surrounding the definition of what masculinity is, and maybe more importantly, what it means to be a man. Opponents of Andrew Tate, aside from saying he's a misogynist and a sexist, say the only thing he does is giving men basic life lessons that could be regarded as being the bare minimum. With a bit of misogyny and sexism added, he sells his life as a dream to aspire to. He is the alpha everyone should listen to, and he can do no wrong. Big houses, fast cars, and lots of women, the dream of almost every young man. In the criticisms, he holds a very economic and transactional view of love and intimacy, typical for the red pill community. He doesn't, on the other hand, offer any moral, spiritual, or emotional fulfillment, and only does this for the sake of materialistic means and ends. Now, what to make of Andrew Tate? As we have seen, many men feel like they aren't allowed anymore to express themselves freely in their masculine being. Many feel stripped from everything left, right, and center by feminism, and many are afraid of the instability that brings. And although I am able to grasp and understand why men feel this way, and I think actually Andrew Tate is in some way a logical response to the stripping of masculinity done by, what have we, feminism, I still think that Andrew Tate might be the wrong, or better phrased, an incomplete answer to a very important and good question. What makes a man in the 21st century? Sure, he helps many men who might be on the brink of ending themselves, a very big problem that men face, by giving them advice on how to take care of themselves, how to not make men dependent on others to live, and to face up to the responsibilities. Although I think the way he brings it is not the way to go. It should, however, be noted that I do suspect him heavily to indulge in a fair bit of clout chasing when he phrases his opinions in such an extreme manner. I think the best way to go is by connecting to others on a deep level, not by materialistic means, but by an innate desire to connect to others. This is done by training the mind through doing research, reading, and trying to get as much knowledge as you can get your hands on, and by engaging in conversations and genuinely listening to each other, by building up your body and getting the knowledge necessary to do so in the best way possible, in order to train the mind alongside it, and to train the soul by looking deep inside, facing your demons and responsibilities to others and yourself, and finding a way to navigate through the world on your own terms and in your own pace, not by picking up the narrative of a group or one person, but by personally connecting to people and building towards a better and healthier future. But that is just my view. I really hope you enjoyed watching. Please subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment. I will try to engage in as many conversations as I can, and I hope to see you next time.